Hello, and welcome to the English with Colin Podcast, a podcast for English language learners. My name's Colin, I'm an English teacher in Tokyo, and if you're looking to improve your English skills and gain more confidence in your ability to communicate in English, you've come to the right place. In these episodes, I'll provide you with short conversations in English that cover a range of topics, from everyday situations to more specialised subjects. These conversations are designed to help you practice your listening skills and pick up new vocabulary and grammar along the way. Regular listening practice is key to improving your English, and I hope this podcast will become a valuable resource for you on your language learning journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. And remember, the more you listen, the more you'll learn. This is episode 16, and in this episode we're talking about supermarkets in Japan. Hey Sue.
Hey.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Very well. So today I want to talk about one of the things you need to do when you come and live in a country is do all the kind of day-to-day things that life requires. And one of those is going to the supermarket.
Yes, getting your food, right?
Getting your food, yeah. It's not all going off to fancy restaurants. Sometimes you just need to go and get some food that you can bring home and cook. Now, what was your experience coming to Tokyo and trying to go shopping in a little Japanese supermarket?
Well, my first experience, it was a big supermarket, and I think that made it really difficult because the supermarket that was nearest to us was pretty big.
It was pretty big considering it was quite central Tokyo, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was like in a new type of plaza. So I think that's why it was able to be so big.
Yeah, it was on the basement floor, I think.
It was on the
You went
basement
downstairs
floor.
to it, yeah.
Yes.
So it was like a big underground supermarket.
It was fantastic. But yeah, the first times, not only the very first day, but during a period of time, it was still pretty new to me, and I would have headaches.
Well, yeah, I think when you went with me, we were able to kind of get stuff, and I knew my way around a little bit. But yeah, when you started to go by yourself to get food, yeah, you were kind of on your own. So yeah, headaches. Why would you get headaches?
Because there's so many things you have to pay attention to and so many decisions you need to make. Because, well, you need to learn what is there, right? So what kind of fruits, what kind of vegetables can you buy? Because you can think about something you want to make, but it's, the supermarket might not necessarily have those ingredients. It happens now. I know certain ingredients are in certain supermarkets, right?
Right.
Especially little herbs. Some smaller supermarkets might have it, but other things, the bigger supermarkets might have it. This was the only supermarket we would go to at the time.
Much, yeah.
So it's learning what there is and then thinking like, what can I make with that? Because I'm not an expert of dishes that, actually use a culture that uses those ingredients. And also just an understanding where things were and what things were.
Yeah, I mean, you said kind of understanding what there was in the supermarket. It's really interesting. It's one thing I like doing when I go to another country is going into the supermarket to see the differences, because the supermarket in the UK is going to be very different to a supermarket in Mexico, and it's certainly very different to a supermarket in Japan. So, for example, in the UK, the typical fruits and vegetables that we would find are very different to the fruits and vegetables that you'll find in Japan. So one example for me that was a little bit strange was in Scotland, there's a large variety of potatoes. You know, many different types of potatoes sold in large quantities loose. So you'd have big kind of open trays with different varieties of potatoes, and you just grab as many as you want, stick them in a bag. And when you come to Japan, the variety of potatoes is very, very small, and they're often kind of pre-bagged. And just very, very different. Yeah, so potatoes was the one I noticed.
Yeah, no, fruits and vegetables are very, very different here. You buy small quantities. What you're going to have, it's more about the day, I think. I think Japanese, they really like freshness. And freshness is like today, which is great because it there's quality and you know everything is made on that day and it's going to be fresh. But yeah, in Mexico, well, you have markets, for example, and you would go and you buy by the kilo.
Okay.
But not here. So even in supermarkets, they would have weights, so you could know how many.
Oh, they'd have scales.
They have scales,
right,
next to the tomatoes, let's say, and then you can just put them in and put it in the bag, and that would be it. The checkouts. The ladies have scales, so they know how much you're taking. But here is very different. There's less, I would say, less fruits and vegetables. So each one, even though it's very good quality, it's more expensive. So once my dad called and said, I found the tomatoes were very, very cheap. Back in Mexico. In a little market next to his house. And he was delighted. They were good tomatoes. They were very, very cheap. And he told me how much it was for 1 kilo. And I said, Dad, that's what I pay for one, like, big, juicy tomato, but one.
Yeah.
And
so he was getting a kilo of tomatoes for the same amount of money that you were paying to get one kind of chunky tomato. I don't know what you call these kind of big... it's not beef tomato or something. I don't know. These kind of really big, fat tomatoes. So yeah, and that, you've said that is a standard thing. You buy fruit, vegetables by the kilo. That's like a standard measurement of whatever you want. Avocados, you want tomatoes.
So you need to think about your cooking because you don't have just ingredients lying around.
Yeah.
You really need to think about it. So, but that's taught me different ways of cooking. I'm used to it now. Yeah. It's going to be, strange to go back to a kilo of these because what
are you going to do with a kilo?
What am I going to do with a kilo of tomatoes? Or I now I wouldn't know what to do with them.
So, what have you seen as being more common or more available in Japan than in Mexico? I'm thinking mushrooms.
Mushrooms and eggplants.
Eggplant, right.
Eggplant, yes. Those, I would say, you can see a lot of variety. From where I'm from in Mexico, you don't see that many mushrooms. But Japan has an incredible culture.
I think we saw something about the Japanese having one of the largest varieties of mushrooms.
Endemic mushrooms, yeah.
Yeah, and partly because of how humid the climate is, which makes it very suitable for mushrooms.
And the thick forests, yeah.
Yeah, thick forests, shade. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, you go to the supermarket and just the basic supermarket will have maybe 5 different types of mushrooms. And for me growing up, we had button mushrooms. Maybe you might find shiitake mushrooms, but nobody really knew what they were or what they were for. It was button mushrooms, that's basically all we would have.
No, and they're delicious, and I enjoy eating them. and cooking them
and learning how to cook them.
My favorites are just grilled. That would be my favorite way of eating them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've learned to eat more mushrooms, the eggplant as well, how to make it and eat it. And there's many Japanese recipes that use eggplant. So I've enjoyed that a lot. What I'm still not very good at is choosing sauces. Soy sauce or mirin or sake for cooking.
Well, those three things you mentioned there, they are fundamental elements in Japanese cooking. Like, it's quite difficult to find a Japanese dish that doesn't require some soy sauce, mirin, and some cooking sake. They're just core elements, flavor profiles of Japanese food. But I guess we don't cook that much Japanese food in that style. So yeah, buying those sauces or whatever you want to call them, we just don't use them. So they tend to go bad before we finish them.
Yes. So those are still ingredients I haven't learned to use. But I still enjoy discovering new things at the supermarket. I really like to just, I can pay more attention because I know where the things I want are. Yeah. And then that allows me to be able to see other things and try to think about what they are. So even though at the beginning was very stressful, now I find it very enjoyable and I can discover new things. It's great to go to the supermarket. Yeah.
I mean, we're quite lucky that there is a Costco nearby. So if we need anything in large quantities or any sort of particularly Western type of food, we can get what we need out at Costco. But the constraints of a Japanese supermarket is kind of interesting. And I think bread is a good example as well. A standard supermarket in the UK would have a whole aisle of bread, like the length at least the width of the supermarket. Just in one aisle could be all bread. Whereas here, bread is a small section of one aisle, and the variety is quite limited. But it's part of the culture. It's part of the experience. Trying these different foods, learning different ways to prepare the foods, the seasonal foods that are available. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the English with Colin podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation and found it helpful in your language learning journey. Remember, the key to mastering a language is regular practice. So make sure you listen to our podcast regularly and keep honing your listening skills. We appreciate your support and feedback. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future topics, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to joining you again next time for another conversation in English. Until then, keep practicing and take care.